All right, we are going to do child psychology, psychosocial development in early childhood. So, when we start, we have the self. So, we mentioned this in previous chapters, but the self is an overarching umbrella of everything that makes you. So, if you look at the top one, the top bullet, it says the developing self. So, each day we are developing. Sometimes we make mistakes. Maybe we get a little worse. Some days we have really, really great gains. And sometimes we gain weight. Sometimes we lose weight, right? Sometimes we are in a really great relationship. Sometimes we're not. So every time you have a an event happen in your life, whether it's just by yourself or you read a book or you go somewhere or you have a great party, that develops you in one way or another. You really liked it or you didn't like it. You evaluate yourself constantly. So these are a couple ways you evaluate yourself. There's many, many, many more. Self concept. That's your abilities and your traits. So if you looked at yourself and you said, am I good at math? Am I good at reading? Am I good at writing? What sports am I good at? Where do my talents lie? So you could go off of that, or you could go to your traits. My personality. What are things that I am open to doing? What are things I'm not open to doing? So, really paying some mind to your own wants and needs will be your self concept. And your self concept kind of covers a lot of other selves. Like the first one, your self definition. If I asked you to define yourself, what categories would you put yourself in? Are you egocentric? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Do you like being in control? Do you like having power? Would you rather have somebody just tell you what to do? All right. So thinking about that, move on to another thing in the self realm, and that's self-esteem. Self-esteem is linked to your self-worth. So your self-esteem can change across categories. So when I was young, my self-esteem was very low for reading. I wasn't a very good reader till I was maybe 10th grade. So if you were like, oh, we're going to reading class, I would be like, oh man, I hate reading class. That might be like how you feel about math or social studies. You don't like the dates or the numbers or something like that. Your self esteem would drop a little bit. But if you moved into an area that you liked, like sports or writing, your self esteem can come up because you feel you have the ability to be to make a positive gain in that area. So, can self esteem change? Absolutely. Um, think of the cool uncle you have, your best friend, your mom, your dad, your grandparents. When they come into a room or you come into their room, right? How do they make you feel? Who makes you feel the best? The best person that you hang out with. If you're married, I hope it's your significant other. If it's you're living at home, hopefully it's someone at your house or one of your buddies that you hang out with. Um, that really, really make you feel awesome. Because your self esteem really helps out your motivation towards the rest of your day, how you feel about yourself. All right. You always want to build up, don't tear people down. And you'll hear people say this kids are resilient. That is true. Kids are resilient. You can yell at kids and they'll be okay over time. It does depend on their self esteem, it does depend on their personality, and it depends on if they really listen to you or not. Are you one of the people in their lives that they take serious and they want to do well with? If they don't really like you that much, they might pay no attention to you at all. So they're also fragile. I have an idea of how I work with kids and adults, and I call it my chips idea. It's like you're at a poker game and you have those little chips, right? But my chips are imaginary, and my chips build up. So every time I see a kid, whether it's my own kids or my wife or kids at school or adults like you, I think I should be saying something positive to them so that they can feel good about themselves. And the more positives I can give them, maybe you, the better I think you'll feel overall. If you've ever walked in a room and somebody who was in charge or somebody that you respected said, "Hey, I really like that outfit. Those shoes are killer. I like the shirt you're wearing. Your hair looks fabulous. Who did your nails?" Anybody who says something right away, you're already giving chips to that person. Now, depending on how they feel about your feedback or your judgment of them, it might give them more chips or less chips. That you never really know for sure unless you talk to the person. But chips are a big deal because there's always a time in your life, and it might be every day for weeks at a time, that you lose chips. Life is going hard, you get in a car accident, you don't have enough money to pay all your bills, so you get interest charges. There's always things that take it away. You get yelled at. You're late on an assignment. You lose points, right? You're late to work, and your boss screams at you in front of everybody. There's always something that steals your chips. So you want to surround yourself with people who give you chips, who make you feel good about yourself. And you start to build up that like interior wall of you're a good person. And then when other people say the opposite of that, you have that internal chip already built in that somebody can't steal from you. So when you leave, pay attention because you take those chips with you and try to make sure you're giving chips to other people by praise or making them a little gift or a card or something like that. It's a big deal to build people up. Don't tear them down. And if you have to tear them down, make sure you built them up first. If you have kids or you're a teacher or you're going to be a teacher, you're going to have to tell kids the truth. So that means before you do that, you want to make sure you start with positives. Just think of if you were a teacher and you have to call a parent and it's the first week of school. It's not a very good way to be because you haven't had any positive interactions with that parent. You haven't tried to even connect with them. So in the beginning of my year, I try to connect with my parents 3 or 4 times before I make any negative calls about them. Does it always work? No, because some kids are just brutal and you have to call their parents because you need that support. But it does help a lot to those other parents that know, okay, he's reaching out, he's trying, to work with my kid, and he's trying to do it in a positive way. So those things really make a difference. All right, controlling your emotions. So think about you in these scenarios. Are you the kid at Walmart kicking and screaming when you didn't get a toy? Did you cry until you got your way? Do you still cry until you get your way? Do you sulk and go passive aggressive? Are you non-compliant? Are you a yes person? Do you lash out and say things you may not mean? Or maybe you do mean? And possibly worst of all, are you a follower? So the two follower statements are people who just say yes, and the bottom one, where you just follow other people. And I say that's the worst because I don't think people are using their brains if they're just following other people. I think you should make your own decisions. If you choose to follow someone after you make the decision about what you're doing, then at least you made a decision. But following blindly is never a good option. I can tell you when my wife comes up and says she wants to do X, Y, and Z on a day we already have planned, and she changes the plans, I immediately go to no, I don't want to do that. I'm non compliant. I don't like when things change. I like to have a plan. I like to stick to the plan. Does that mean I don't change? No, because I married my wife. So that means I should be ready for at least half of our plans changing because we went into this relationship together. So I have to know that about myself. I'm a non compliant person. I don't want rules to be pushed on me and told what to do. I don't like that. And who does? So, unless you're the follower, maybe you do. So, that's something about me that I'm not really good with. I am not passive aggressive. If I think that something needs to be said, I'd rather just say it. And if it's going to cause a fight, I'd rather have the fight sooner rather than later. A later fight would probably be way worse because you'd be harboring emotions. Um, and lashing out and saying things you don't mean, I don't do that. I try to curtail everything that comes out of my mouth. That doesn't mean I don't think things. It just means I try to use a filter before I say things to certain people. And sometimes I say things that might be considered mean, but my goal is never to tear people down in the long term. Emotions. Who do you compare yourself to in relation to emotions? If you were like, I'm my mom, my dad, my grandma, my aunt, or I'm not like anyone in my family, I'm very laid back, or I'm high strung, I have a lot of anxiety, right? You go through all that and start to categorize yourself, right? It goes back to your definition from the very beginning. Are you a stable person? You get things done, you just go about your day. You might not get super excited, but you also don't have super lows. You're not depressed about things. You just kind of stay in the middle, you do what you have to do, and you keep pushing through. When you do your social comparison, what are thoughts you have about yourself? I'll explain mine. So, when I look at myself compared to other people, I'm extremely organized. Always looking to improve. I'm more than happy to redo something to do it better the next time I use it. So this PowerPoint, I might keep this for a year or two. I might get rid of it the next class. It all depends on how I look at it and the feedback I get from the PowerPoints and the videos. When I look at other people, I try to evaluate them based on what I do because we all look for similarities in people that we're around. And those similarities help our self esteem and make us like that person, or we find differences and then we find fault, usually with the other person's differences. Not all the time. Sometimes I look at other people and the way they do stuff and I say, oh, that's an interesting way to do it. I don't know if I would do it, but that's an interesting way. Not to put them down, but um, looking at that social comparison piece is a big deal because you have to start to realize what are those hidden biases you have in your head. And that's really hard to state. So one of mine I learned, just in the past 4 years, I've been reading books on this, and I learned that when I would see rich people and driving super fast in their Maserati or in their Porsche, in my head I would think like, man, just because they're rich, they think they can do anything they want, and that might not be the reason at all, right? That's a bias. So they just might want to go really fast in their expensive car. It might have to do with because they're rich. So one of the things I'm trying to curtail at my age is just trying to um, pay attention to those biases before they come out. And I think that's important to know our biases. Remember, you're around the age of 5. So think of your gender roles. They're the things that categorize you at a young age. So they'll be your interests, your attitude, your skills, and your personality. Usually at this age, you'll play with everyone. Females and males play together, and they might have specific attitudes or skills. So some people will be very extroverted. Girls are way more social in their ability to have dialogue. Um, Boys tend to usually stay to themselves or have minimal conversation during playtime. If you look at gender typing, what role you acquire. So you don't have to be prescribed a gender role just because you're a specific sex. That I think that's becoming more apparent as the years go on now, especially with the movements that we're having since 2021. I think people are realizing that, hey, you can be whatever you want, and really, who cares? So you should be who you are and enjoy who you are while you're on Earth. There are gender stereotypes, which are overgeneralizations about male or female behavior. So all females are, what would you put in that blank? Males should, could I say males should play with Barbies? Should I say all females should be playing with trucks? All females are dainty. All males are strong. So think of those things that you would put in those categories. Evolutionary developmental approach. So this is Darwinian theory, which holds that the selection of sexual partners is influenced by the differing reproductive pressures that early men and women confronted in evolutionary past. So think, men tend to prefer more sexual partners. The more partners a male has, the more chance they have their offspring of um, being born. Women tend to protect their offspring and prefer a man who will stand by them. So if you look at the evolutionary perspective, it kind of makes sense, right? You need someone who's going to protect you and your baby, and a man will be the provider and maybe the hunter at, at an early stage in the human species. So this might not necessarily be as true today, but I think this still does go on. I think this still does go on. It's not something you can just discount. Um, the goal of this is survival of the species. It's not necessarily where we're at in our society now, which is an industrialized society where we are thriving in some parts of our world versus others. But as a human species, we are doing very well to um, have a better life than someone who's just surviving on a day-to-day basis. So your thoughts will be your own thoughts on this part. Psychoanalytical approach, that's identification. So this is where the theory that the child takes on the same sex parents' attitudes, beliefs, characteristics, values, and behaviors. So a daughter will lean more towards her mother. A son will lean more towards his father. So think about this though. Sometimes in class, this has like a 50-50 take. Sometimes the daughter takes more of a father role and the son takes more of a mother role. But I don't think this is as clean cut now as it was 20 years ago. So think about you. Are you the same as your same sex parent, or are you different than them? Or are you still rebelling and not thinking about who you're like at all? Which could definitely be the case. Cognitive approach. So you definitely want to start looking at Kohlberg's cognitive development theory. Um, Kohlberg has some really cool things we're going to do with moral development. But if you look at children learn, they are one sex and will be that for life. Then they adopt behaviors consistent with the sex. When we say sex, we're male, female is what we're looking at. Gender roles are then assumed, and there are three stages of the cognitive approach to in Kohlberg's theory. So one is their gender identity, learning what gender they are and say, hey, this is me. Gender stability is where they will take the characteristics that are consistent with the way they see themselves and they will stick to those. And then gender consistency is a continuation of being in the same roles or categories that they were assigned because of their gender in the very beginning of their development. So if you had a girl who wore dresses and was very into tea parties and dressing up and playing with her dolls and all that, it's very likely that that same person, as they grow up, will maintain some of those I don't want to say biases, but some of those same characteristics that they used or they assumed at an early age. Gender schema theory. First, you have to think of a schema. A schema, we talked about before, is like your file folders for every single thing you know about. So, four-legged animals, boom, a folder opens up with four-legged animals. If you have a um, TV shows, as soon as I say TV shows, you go, okay, I watched these, I did this. Or if I said gaming, you would probably have something on your phone. Maybe you have an Xbox or a PlayStation. So after you start to develop your gender constancy, you begin to identify as a male or a female. And what do they like and what do they dislike? So boys, a lot of people will buy them trucks and wrestling stuff and that. But girls, they buy more dolls and Barbies and things that are like kinder and nicer. But is this true anymore? Do we still have this same exact ideology? So this is where you would pick like, yes, it's 100% true. 0% would be no, it's not true, or somewhere in the middle. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but thinking of your influences out of your family, your friends, people around you, your peers, and your culture, or anyone else, such as the workplace or um, places that you visit, who are your main influencers? And what are they influencing you to do? Types of play. There's functional play, constructive play, dramatic play, formal games with rules, and social versus non-social play. Now, each type of play has its own uniqueness. Um, Functional play might mean where kids are acting out a specific role. Constructive play is where you're just, I look at this as fun with a purpose. Like we can constructively play um, with our T Rexes together, or we can do Twister or something like that. Um, Dramatic play would be where you might be acting out something. If you've ever seen boys or girls chase each other and say, "Oh my God, they're a monster," or "They have cooties," or this or that, they're playing a role for you. There are formal games with rules. If you start to get into games like Twister or Monopoly or things like that, or tag, freeze tag, ball tag. All of them have specific rules that we have to follow, but they are good types of play. Social versus non-social. Social are games that you play with other people, and non-social would be something like a solitaire game where you can just do it on your own. Maybe you play on your phone or your tablet, or maybe you go down in the basement and play your Xbox, PlayStation, or whatever console you have, such as like a Switch or something. And sometimes people want to play with a whole bunch of people. Sometimes they're more non-social and they just want to play, their one-player game. Um, so games open up a whole new realm. All right, parenting style. There's a whole separate slideshow for this, so I'll send that out. Aggression. There's different types of aggression. The first part is aggression that we normally see, and what you would think of if I said, "Hey, is that kid aggressive?" That would be something that you would be able to observe. Are they hitting someone? Are they pushing someone? Are they yelling at each other? And that's overt. That's something you can see. Excuse me. Relational aggression, which is indirect and social. So this is where it's aimed at damaging or interfering with a person's relationships, reputation, psychological well-being, can be overt or covert. Overt is where you can see it. Covert is where people are spreading rumors about you. Like, for example, let's say you're in high school and somebody said, "Oh, I think she sleeps with a lot of people." You might not have slept with anybody, right? Or the boy in your class cheats all the time, where he may have never cheated before. People might say that stuff behind your back, but they never say it to you. If you overhear them, then it becomes overt. But if they're just spreading rumors that they don't know if they're true or not, then it's covert. So you should really think of how aggression affects your life, and are you one of the people being aggressive? So try to think of examples for these so you start to understand them. All right, we are done. Thank you for listening.